My name is Tara Ludlow, and I'm here today as part of the United Way's Day of Caring with Bob Scolnik on September 8th in Muskegon, Michigan, along with Camille Preer. This interview is being conducted for the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. So it's nice to meet you, Bob.
Okay.
My husband's name is Bob, so I know how to take care of Bob.
Okay.
Don't you worry. We're going to start off our interview today just by starting real simple with where were you born, Bob?
I was born in Albany, New York.
Okay, when were you born? When's your birthday?
I was born on May 24th, 1944.
1944. Can you tell me about your parents?
Yeah, I was lucky and just had conventional parents, and they were, they stayed together, no divorces. One of the things I know about them was they were married on April 1st, 1933,
Okay.
right in the middle of the Depression.
Yeah.
My dad was an auto mechanic.
My husband's an auto mechanic.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
there's a history to that, but he eventually became the service manager at a new car dealership, and that's what he did for, all the years when I was growing up. We lived in Albany, and then eventually moved. We lived in an apartment. I don't remember the apartment. I know the building, but we eventually they bought a house, and they didn't really do anything super exciting. My dad. I have pictures of him during the Second World War. He was not in the war because he was too old and he had two kids. But they did their part. I still have their ration card.
Oh.
And I have a photograph from the Albany Times-Union newspaper when he had gone to take first aid training in case they needed it. And he was also an air raid warden, and airplane spotter. He took a spotting course.
Oh.
So if we had ever been, they tried to invade us, they could identify the airplanes.
I never even thought of that as being
No,
something.
I mean, it was serious because at night, they had blackouts, and they didn't really talk about it, but they did talk about it a little bit, but I remember it later. I've thought about what would happen today if there was another big incident like that for the Second World War.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that young people would respond in the same way. I joined the Army. I mean, I wish I could tell you I couldn't wait to join, but I did join, and I don't have any regrets about doing it. And I thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I was doing the right thing. And I have a cousin. I recently discovered this because one man in our family is sort of the historian, and I have a cousin. Her name was Enid. And Enid was married in 1943. I was born in 1944, so I don't remember any of this. But she married a guy named Morris Arbit, A-R-B-I-T, and they called him Mo. Well, he was in the Army Air Force, and he was a navigator on a B-24. And he was killed on takeoff on a bombing run that was supposed to go to Germany in 1944. So they had only been married for a year, and he was killed. I mean, it was just so. The cousin who has been documenting all, the history of the family. I have a picture of the newspaper article about it. I have a picture of his grave. Enid then went on to remarry eventually because she was a young woman, and I knew her, and I knew her second husband, and I sort of heard that there was a husband that had been killed. But anyway, so it just goes to show that even in my family, basically I'm second generation immigrant. How it impacted so many people in this country, and I'm just concerned about people caring enough about our country.
Absolutely. It sounds like your family was very much involved in the protection of this
Well,
country,
they,
and yeah,
but people did. Everybody. I mean, I don't know about everybody, but I mean,
a lot.
most people did.
Yeah.
So when I enlisted, I just graduated from college, and I sort of saw it as an obligation.
Okay.
Like I kind of owed it. I mean, would I have preferred not to go? Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But I signed up and I went, and I went to basic training and advanced infantry training, and then I went to officer candidate school. I was a college graduate when I enlisted.
What did you study in college?
I have a bachelor's degree in economics.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But where I'm going with this is that OCS, that whole Army experience. I'm a little guy. At my peak, I was 5'4", and back in those days, weighed about 130 pounds. So I'm a little man. I mean, it's like I'm not going to be getting in fights with people because I'm going to lose. So I became really good at getting along with people. But my Army experience taught me, even though I may have been one of the smallest men in the unit, that I could do almost anything. I remember running an officer candidate school. I mean, we had to run with packs and rifles for miles. I'm talking like 7 or 8 miles. And I'm not, it's more of a jog, but still.
Oh, yeah.
I could do it. Other people are passing out. I mean, it was hot there in the summer. And honestly, I credit that with my success in life, because even though I have a college degree and I'm reasonably smart, you'd think I would have had a job at some point. I never had a job, and I always owned businesses. And I started with just me, almost by accident in Muskegon, and ended up with about 100 employees, and retired when I was 53. So
Well, and I was going to ask you that. Did you have a job prior to going into the military?
no, I was in. There's a sad story attached to that, because I graduated from college in 1966, and I went on to graduate school. I was going to get an MBA, and I'd had this is a whatever, I'm going to talk about it. I'd had a girlfriend for about 2 years, and we didn't go to the same school, but she went to another college nearby, and I thought this was like a girlfriend. So I had to borrow money to go to graduate school. So I borrow money, enroll in graduate school, get an apartment, move there. In October, she calls me up and breaks up with me. And I didn't see this coming at all. And it was like, oh my God. So I dropped out of school because I just couldn't go to school anymore. And the draft was going on. And by the time they found out I wasn't in school anymore, I would probably be drafted. And I needed to just do something, like something different.
Yeah.
So I joined, and I wanted to. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't want to. I did. I just went and enlisted.
Yeah.
So thank you to this ex-girlfriend. I got a much better deal out of this.
It was just very, how your path can take you somewhere unexpectedly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What branch?
I
Did you
enlisted in the U.S. Army, and when you go in the Army, I went. It's just basic training and advanced infantry training, so it was all infantry. Then, because I was a college graduate, I was guaranteed at least a chance at officer candidate school.
Oh.
I mean, because that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
But it required another year of enlistment. So I went to Transportation Corps officer candidate school. So I was a Transportation Corps officer, and that took 6 months. So that whole basic advanced infantry training, this, that, and the other thing, took close to a year.
And is that why you chose that particular branch? Because that was of interest?
I don't know if they gave me that or if I requested it. I don't remember. It was right for me. I had my dad being a mechanic, I had worked as a mechanic for a couple of years, and transportation involves, all the transport, vehicles and all that. And I know I wasn't going to be a mechanic, but like in the end, I ended up a battalion S4, which involves supply and maintenance. So I was over the motor pool and all the stuff, the equipment and whatnot.
Yeah. How did you get to your initial point of entry?
If I remember right, I enlisted in Albany, and I think they gave me a date to show up someplace, and I went on a bus with a bunch of other people, if I remember right. A little spooky.
Yeah, that's the same story that we have heard, and I can imagine, because you're just not exactly sure.
A bunch of kids, some didn't want to go, but we all showed up and went, and they shaved our heads.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't need my head shaved anymore. But
no, and that's interesting, because I was going to ask you next, what is your most vivid memory of your time in training or school? And it seems like that.
No, that wasn't it.
That wasn't it. One of them.
That wasn't it. Really, the basic training and advanced infantry training, when you're just there new, it's really kind of scary. I mean, it's just you're with people you don't know, and and it was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and it was, I went in January. It's freezing there, and like part of it, we had slept outside in the winter in a little tent, a little pup tent, and it's not like that stuff. I remember it that well. I don't, but I mean, it was things that not in a million years that I think I could do. And I did, and I wasn't bad at it either. I mean, I wasn't the best, but I certainly was pretty good. But then when I went to officer candidate school, then stuff got serious, because it was, you were with other people who did care. And I really went out of my way to try to do good there, and I did. So.
What would you say for your training part overall was the best part of it?
Okay, so keep in mind, I'm like the midget in the officer candidate school. It's 6 months, all right. So at the end, the last 2 months, they elect student leadership. So they elect the battalion commander, the deputy commander, there's 6 ranks maybe, including the sergeant major, and it's the 150 or 200 people that were in the battalion, if I remember right, vote for leadership. And believe it or not, I got elected to one of those.
That's fantastic.
It was. I mean, it just showed that you don't have to be 6 feet tall and 200 pounds
to make an impact,
to be respected as a leader.
That's amazing.
So, and all of this, that was cool. That was like, nobody cares about this anymore except me. Because nobody even knows about it. But that was like unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is.
And so, when I got out, at the end of the 4 years, and I had met another girlfriend who didn't dump me, in Muskegon, or not, in Grand Rapids, and we got married. So I'm going to get out of the Army. I'm going to stay here. Well, it was a franchise, but I started a business in Muskegon, and that's how I ended up here. And people say, well, what was your plan B? Like, what if that didn't work? Honestly, I never considered that. I mean, there was no way I wasn't going to, survive. I'd gotten through this other crap. This is like easy compared to that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Uncle Sam.
Absolutely. Well, and you make those impressions on people, and people can read that from you. It must be.
No, I sold, when I got out, I was a Snap-on tools dealer. If your husband's a mechanic, you know about Snap-on tools.
She knows all about Snap-on tools.
They're super expensive, too.
Oh.
I'm sure he's got a budget that he spends every week on that. Usually they do.
He has a Hawaiian t-shirt with Snap-on tools.
Did he get that as a gift for Christmas?
I have a Snap-on teddy bear at home. We have it. I know. So we could talk about Snap-on, yes. So how about this? So similarly to having those great experiences and that piece that sticks with you, can you share maybe a memory that wasn't so awesome from training? Was there something that you remember that wasn't the best
Well,
experience?
yes, I can. I don't remember if it was in basic training or I think it was in advanced infantry training.
Mm-hmm.
I got sick. I mean, I fought it off too, but I had leave. I was in New Jersey, and I hadn't been home, and I wanted to get out of there and go home. And I mean, I don't know what my temperature was, but I was really sick. So I try to go home, and I'm too sick to go home. I mean, I was at a bus station. I don't remember where I was, but I was somewhere. So I got back. I don't know how I got back, but I ended up in the hospital for a week, which isn't cool because that means I got what was called recycled because you can't miss a week. You know, they put you in another. I mean, you got to start all. You don't have to start all over again, but they put you in another class where you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
So I got through that, but I mean, that was kind of like I still remember how bad I felt. I mean, I had a fever. I was like some kind of upper respiratory infection or something. But I mean, it's sick enough to stay in the hospital.
Yeah.
And that was like pretty terrible. But you know, if you want. Okay, I don't know what else you got. I do have one experience I do want to talk about, though.
Yeah, I would be
pretty
happy to
cool.
hear that.
All right, so I graduated from officer candidate school, and then they sent me to aircraft maintenance officer school.
Yeah.
So I learned how to be on, I learned about how helicopters and work back in the day when they still had piston engines. I mean, this is ancient history now. But, so I finished that school. That was like 4 months. Or 2 months. I don't remember how long it was, but then they sent me to St. Louis to the headquarters. It was called the Aviation Materiel Command, and it was an office building in downtown St. Louis, and it's the headquarters for Army aviation. So all the Army had was light planes and helicopters. So I'm there, a brand new second lieutenant, and everybody there is like a colonel or a general. And much of my time was spent hiding from people. So then I'm there. I had some little duties to do, but not much. Then they want to send me to Vietnam as a courier to deliver a C-130 plane. A C-130 is an Air Force plane. It's a 4-engine piston, not piston, it's a turboprop, but it's a propeller airplane, so it doesn't go very fast, about 250 miles an hour. So I go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where there's an Army depot and a runway, and there's a C-130 there that they're loading with pallets of parts for a brand new helicopter. A Chinook is this giant helicopter. I don't know if you know what that is, but
I've heard of it.
Okay, it's a giant helicopter with 2 blades, and it's big.
Yeah.
Well, they introduced the C model, and they wanted to get these parts there because they were just starting. The helicopters were just coming into country. All right, so they want me to accompany the parts to Vietnam. They give me a pistol, and here's the plan. I'm going to go to the Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base with this plane load of parts. They're going to unload them, and I am going to stay with those parts with a gun until the right people come to pick them up. Because the way that worked was when you went to when they unloaded stuff, frequently stuff got stolen. And it wasn't stolen to sell, it was stolen because everybody was looking for parts for their particular broken trucks or airplanes or whatever they had. So I'm there with a gun, a second lieutenant, on a runway, and I can't leave the part. I mean, there was a place, if you had to go to the, I mean, you're going to have to go to the bathroom eventually. You know, that was there. So I had to wait there for a couple days. But here's the best part. So a C-130 takes about a week to fly to Vietnam. It's that slow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I flew from Harrisburg to Texas, then from Texas to San Francisco, San Francisco to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to like Guam or Midway, and then to Guam or Midway, and then to the Philippines. Finally, end up in Vietnam.
That's a long trip.
It was like, what an experience. I mean, who gets to do that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like, here I am, the only one on the airplane. And I sat up with the crew, because there was, the seats in the back were just canvas seats. And there was all that stuff back there. So I'm sitting up with the crew, and they had some, you know, the plane would land, and somebody'd have to look at it to make sure it was okay. And then you would sleep there on the ground someplace. And not on the ground, there'd be some, you know, like a little bachelor officer quarter or something. Then you get back on the plane, be at the plane at 6 a.m., and you'd eat whatever. And I mean, it was like, oh my God, I remember flying over the Golden Gate Bridge. I still remember that. You know, I'm sitting up in the front, there's this big windshield, and the thing's going slow, and it was just super cool. I mean, it was like, here I am 50 years later, and I still remember that.
Yeah.
You know,
That's great.
yeah, I wish I had taken a camera. I didn't. You know, back in those days, I carry if I had my phone.
No, that's
Yeah,
great
yeah.
that you still have that memory. Do you have any instructors at that time from your training time that stand out in your memory?
No, not really.
Not
I
any.
don't. I'm not one of those people that tends to. My memory just doesn't work like that.
Sure. Was that one of your first assignments after basic training?
Yeah, it was that going to St. Louis was my first real duty assignment.
Okay.
Then after that, I was in Korea for 13 months.
Oh.
Then, wait a minute, that would account for the second year. And then the last, because I had basic training in OCS, all that stuff took up a year. Then I went to St. Louis for about a year. Then I went to Korea for 13 months. And then they sent me to Grand Rapids.
Okay.
So in Grand Rapids, I was a captain, and I was senior advisor to the Army Reserve in Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Kalamazoo. I don't remember. There's like 4 or 5 places.
Great.
And I would go to the damn meetings, and I went to summer camp for 8 weeks. You know, they would go for 2 weeks. I stayed in a tent up at Camp Grayling. That was terrible.
It's still not that great anymore. It still is not.
That's a great segue into, I was going to ask, what was the hardest part of the military lifestyle for you to adapt to, would you say?
All right. So now that you're bringing that up, here's the worst thing that I had to do. When I was in Grand Rapids, okay, I'm a captain. There's only one other person in the office, a Sergeant E7, a staff sergeant. And mostly what we did there was paperwork and attend meetings at night, you know, and then we filled out reports and all kinds of things. But I had an additional duty that I was assigned. It was called a Survivor Assistance Officer. And I had a chunk of West Michigan. So whenever somebody was killed in Vietnam, I had to go tell the people.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I'd never had anybody, like a close family member, die. And I'm 20, you know, I don't know how old I was, 24, 25.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really remember that, because I would, you know, you'd think they send you a telegram. They do. Back in those days, they'd send you a telegram after you were notified. So, and the rule was I couldn't go by myself. I had to take the sergeant with me.
Yeah.
And you had to drive. We had a car that was assigned to the Army Reserve thing. And it was an old green Plymouth that said U.S. Army on the side of it. And you have to dress in your dress uniform. And when you go to somebody's house, they know what you're there for. And I had, it was horrible. I mean, if you can imagine, because sometimes it'd be like a teenage woman with a baby come to the door.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was parents. Sometimes people got really angry. And then after you did that, then those people, I was their contact with the Army for everything. I would help arrange I would meet the airplane at the airport. I would accompany it to the funeral home. I would make arrangements for the funeral. If they wanted military honors, I would arrange that. I would make sure they got their insurance, which, by the way, in those days was $10,000. Not much money for that.
Yeah.
And that was that. Didn't like that. Although I will say, I was a county commissioner in the county here for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go to, I didn't run again. I had enough. But I used to go to a couple meetings a year for the Michigan Association of Counties, and frequently they were in Lansing at a convention center. And one year I'm at the convention center, and a guy comes up to me and says, "Are you Bob Scolnik?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You don't know me, but I don't know if you ever saw these gas trucks. It said Schmuckel Oil on the side of them." And they would pick up the fuel here and take it back to like gasoline, go back to Traverse City. Mm-hmm. He told me his name, and he remembered me. His nephew was killed, and he remembered me, and it was like a really long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was pretty cool.
It is. I can imagine that you would really remember.
I remember the name because it's an odd, it's kind of an odd name.
Yeah.
And I remember the trucks. And we used to, I owned Muskegon Brake, and we didn't work on their trucks, but I remember those big 8-axle rigs. That was really, that was horrible.
That would be tough. Can you remember maybe what one of the easier parts of military life or adjusting to military life was for you?
No, I know this. I know that, okay, I really liked the Army until I didn't like Grant. I had thought about staying in the Army because that's how much I liked it. It was a cool thing. I liked the uniforms. I liked, the responsibility.
Yeah.
But once they sent me to Grand Rapids, it wasn't that I didn't like what I did. I didn't, it wasn't great, but it was fine. But like, if you're going to stay in the Army, going to Grand Rapids is not a plus.
Okay.
It's like a dead end job. So, and then I got out in 1970, and the war was starting to wind down. And there was this term they use, RIF, which is reduction in force. So there was like 1.5 million people in the Army, and they started getting rid of people. And I know I would have been one of them. They they had too many officers, and I didn't go to West Point or anything, So I probably would have stayed in. But my wife was a teacher, and I don't know. That was another good thing about being in the Army, I guess, is being stationed in Grand Rapids and meeting my wife there. That was cool.
Yeah.
I met her I'm Jewish. My wife was Jewish. She'd gotten a new job in California because she couldn't find somebody here. And just through a fluke, I found a roommate when I moved to Grand Rapids in the newspaper. Nobody would do that today because you'd get some murderer. And he had gotten a divorce, and he needed a couple of people, and I was one of them, to move in and help him pay the rent or pay the mortgage payment. And he was going to these singles dances in downtown Grand Rapids at the, I can't remember if it was the Fountain Street Church. It was one of their Park Street congregation. It was one of the major famous churches downtown. He was going and met a woman who used to go to the same hairdresser as what was going to become my wife, and knew she was Jewish, and so we both went to the next one, and we just hit it off. I don't know, I proposed in a week.
Oh, really?
I'm serious. We were married for a little over 50 years and never really had a bad argument. I mean, we had lots of arguments, but nothing serious ever.
How long now? Were you still in the military when you got married? Or
Yeah.
Yes. So how long were you in the military for after you had gotten married?
Okay, we got married in, I can't remember, I think it was in July, and I got out in December.
Okay, so shortly after.
But I did wear, if you looked at wedding pictures, I'm in my dress blues.
Yeah.
And and she was from Pittsburgh. We got married in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And it was cool. The only problem with that is, okay, so I'd been in the Army for over, 3.5 years at that point. And my college friends had all disappeared, and I didn't have any high school friends anymore. I mean, because I wasn't living anywhere near anybody. So that was a little, I think back on that. I mean, my best friend from college was there, my brother. It was a small wedding party because I didn't have, your life changed.
Yep, a change, and you were traveling.
Yeah.
What you had mentioned a couple places that you did get to see while you were in the military. Are there any other places that you got to visit while you were touring, or?
I did go. Korea and Japan are close together, and I took. I was able to go there by ship. And spent a few, I don't remember how long I was there, maybe 3 days in Japan, so I did get to do that. I mean, just living in Korea for 13 months. Korea back in the 60s was still a third world country.
Yeah.
There were a lot of super poor people there. But it really was an experience for me. I mean, just to see that, and just to go to Vietnam. And I remember when I was in Vietnam, not that I fought or anything, I didn't, but I remember you could hear explosions and gunfire 24 hours a day. I don't know where it wasn't close, but I remember driving around thinking somebody's going to jump out and shoot me. It didn't happen, but it was anyway, I'm glad I went there. And I remember getting off the airplane, and the airplane was air conditioned, at least where the crew was. When you get off the airplane, it was like you walked into an oven. I mean, it was like super hot and humid. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to be fighting there out in the boondocks.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
And you were there for, you said 13 months?
I'm talking about Vietnam.
Yeah.
Korea, I was in Korea. I really, a tour of duty there is 12 months, but I re-enlisted. And that's, by re-enlisting, at that point I thought I might stay in.
Yes.
So by re-enlisting, I got promoted to captain. And then, I said, okay, I'll get promoted and see what happens. And I got married.
Yeah. When you were on your tours, was it easy for you to stay in touch with friends and family?
No. When I was in Korea, I've written about this occasionally on Facebook, but you couldn't call. It really was almost impossible to call home. There were undersea cables, I think, that did it.
Okay.
And nobody had, cell phones didn't exist.
Right.
But we used to send these little reel-to-reel tapes back and forth, like maybe once a month. You'd have these little reel-to-reel tape recorders. In fact, I remember my parents didn't have the recorder. They'd have to go to someplace in Albany where you'd sit there with a microphone. You could talk for maybe 15 minutes.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it really, calling was not. Maybe I talked to him once. I don't know, but it wasn't like you. Now you just pick up your cell phone and you can call. But no, that was difficult. But we did write letters. I mean, it was like I still have some of those letters. It's kind of cool.
That is.
I wish. They asked today to bring pictures. I have hardly any pictures, but this one is so cool. That is me.
That's you?
I was officer the day when I was in Korea, and I don't know who took the picture. I don't know what camera they used or however, but I got that.
That is a fantastic picture.
And I look like a tough guy, don't I?
You do. You look very serious.
And look how thin I am, too.
We all have our peak.
I'd like to go back to those days.
I hope you have that picture framed on your wall somewhere.
That's
a fantastic
I never
picture.
did anything dangerous, and you won't see a picture of me carrying a gun because I didn't hardly ever. But
no, that deserves to be in a frame on your wall.
When we're done, I'll tell you a funny story about the gun. But I'm not going to do it on the telephone.
What would you say was the best experience about your service?
I think the best experience really was my graduation from Officer Candidate School. I felt like I'd accomplished like the hardest thing in the world, and it really probably wasn't. I mean, West Point would be worse, harder, but here I go from this personal tragedy and with this girlfriend who I'm glad I never. Oh my God, I've been more lucky than smart. Who would do that? So, anyway, so I go from that to like feeling like I really accomplished something really fantastic.
Absolutely.
And then that led, to a life full of things like that. I mean, I think to be married for 50 years is pretty good. And I've been successful in business, I've been successful in politics, and I've been successful in a lot of things. And here I am, look at me, I don't deserve it.
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but that's amazing that you correlate all that together.
Yeah.
So, do you recall the day that your service ended? Do you remember that?
No, I don't. I'm just trying to think. I think it just, all I am, there's just two people in that office, and the date came, and I probably had a couple of weeks leave left, so I, got paid for a couple of weeks. I didn't have to work, and I probably had to go to Indianapolis to fill out some paperwork, and it was over. And I started a business like a couple of weeks later.
Yep. And what business was it?
It was that Snap-on thing.
Yes.
I mean, I had been working on that before I got out.
So it all starts with you.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking for a business or something I could do, and that one, I'm glad I did that. It was super hard, but it was, it taught me a lot about business, taught me about credit, it taught me about sales.
So it sounds like overall you feel like you did adjust well back to civilian life?
Yeah, I did. I was fine. We lived in an apartment in Grand Rapids, and I used to commute to Muskegon every day, and then, which was kind of a pain, because I was driving a truck, I mean, it wasn't, and then my wife applied for a job here, and actually she got the job over the phone. She was a special ed teacher, and they were just starting that here, and they could use, I mean, they could use an experienced teacher, so it worked out great.
Did you continue any friendships after service? Anyone that you had made connections with?
Zero.
Yeah.
Although I got an email and then a phone call just recently, say within the last 6 months, from somebody who was in my OCS class. And then a couple days ago, I got an email that had a spreadsheet with all the people he had found, asking if I would be interested, not just me, everybody, if they'd be interested in a reunion in Virginia, which is where the school was. And I said I would definitely be interested then.
That's very exciting.
When I graduated from high school in 1962, and then I went to college, I really never went home again. I went home, for summers for a few months, but back in those days, I worked 2 jobs every summer because I needed the money to. My parents had somehow saved up the money to go to college, but no spending money. So I worked every summer, and I really didn't have time to fool around. I worked till 5, and then I worked at a gas station from 5 to 10 or 6 to 10. So I kind of lost touch with everybody. Then. Maybe 20 years ago, I get an email from my high school, and they're trying to find people. And then, thanks to the internet, somebody found me, and I really got involved with my high school friends, and I reconnected completely. I've been on 4 cruises with them, and I've been to every reunion. And I was editor of the high school newspaper, and I produced another. I'm talking a series like 34 pages. Newspaper. It was a lot of work, but it was so much fun.
That is so exciting. Good for you.
Yeah, I'm really glad I did that. We're getting. I took my new girlfriend to the last class reunion, which was last summer, and we're getting. I'm 69 or 79, so I mean, reunions are getting small.
That's all right.
But it's been a lot of fun. And I think if I went to this reunion for Officer Candidate School, I would remember some of the people.
So it's something you're considering doing?
Oh, I would definitely do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
If they
great.
can put it together, if they can get 20 people to go.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was actually one of my next questions too. So that's awesome. How would you describe or feel that the military service has affected your life overall?
You know, people, when they find out I'm in the Army now or was in the Army, people are always wanting to say, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of think of it as like just a gratuitous thing, because in 1969 and 70, when I was in Grand Rapids, you couldn't wear your uniform off. You wouldn't want to wear your uniform. I mean, you could wear it if you wanted to, but people didn't like you. You know, they were. You've heard this before. You know, baby killers and all this stuff. I mean, I never did any of that. I don't think anybody did it on purpose. You know. So they hated us back then. Now we're like heroes, you know. And I mean, if you want to thank you for your service, okay, well, thank you, you know. But and looking back on it, I could care less about that. I don't need to be thanked for. I mean, I got out in 1970. It was 53 years ago. You're just getting around to thanking me now. But I didn't do it for that. I did it because it was the right thing to do. It was an adventure. And it was kind of fun, and I did stuff that who gets to throw hand grenades? I mean, who gets to shoot a machine gun? You know, I don't know, it was cool. It's a man thing. You probably have no interest in shooting a machine gun.
Well, maybe not myself personally, but I definitely, I think when people say, and I can only speak for myself, to say thank you for your service, just because although there may be some really amazing things that you are able to take out of it, it's also very well known sometimes the prices and the sacrifices that are also made. So just knowing that those chances can happen is saying thank you for that and for taking those risks and those chances.
How many people would go away for 13 months and never been able to talk to your family?
I mean,
nobody would want to do that.
And be risking their life when they're doing it sometimes.
It could have happened. It didn't, but it could have easily happened.
Right.
No, I'm grateful for the opportunities that the service gave me, and you know, I explained how I think it made me a much, you know, I could not. If I had worked for somebody, I'd be financially far worse off, and probably not have as good an opinion of myself, if that makes sense. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think everything worked out. I think God, I'm not a super religious person, but I think there is a God, and I think that somebody played a part in my life. I mean, really, I got engaged in a week. I wouldn't recommend you do that anymore. People live together and then, you know, get married, then they get divorced. I don't know. I mean, it was just I've been super lucky in a lot of things. I know, you know, I wouldn't have probably joined the Army. I probably would have stayed in graduate school for 2 years and gotten my MBA, and then what would have happened? The war was still going on. So, and that woman, I won't say her last name. Her name was Jane, but she was not a good person. Because a good person wouldn't have done that. A good person would have warned me or something. I don't know, just said, you know, this isn't working and I'm not happy, and, you know, what do you do that? That's the right thing to do.
No, but what I find interesting is just out of that turn came all the great things that
I agree. You know, and there's another good thing. I know this has nothing to do with the Army, but I'm just going to tell you. All right, so I own Muskegon Brake. It's pretty successful. I mean, I'm doing well, and I wanted to sell the company because I was so aggravated every day by crap. You know, deliver a truckload of stuff to Detroit and they delivered the wrong stuff. I mean, it's like, really? or customers mad because somebody did screw something up. I'll fix it, but in the meantime, I got to listen to somebody unload on me, and I know that's part of my job, listening to somebody complain. All right, so I'm trying to sell it. I get an offer from a guy he's putting together this little conglomerate. His name was Arnold Ott. He used to own Ott Chemical up north of here. And so the deal's done. I'm not getting all the money I want, but I'm getting stock in this new company. And I'm thinking, he owned Whitehall Metal Products and some other things. And about 2 weeks before the thing was going to close, he calls me and wants to have another meeting. And I've already had 100 meetings with him. So, okay, we're meeting. And he says that he had a board of directors, which included one of the bosses. How could that be bad? Anyway, he backs out. He says the board, they don't want to go through with this at this point. Anyway, 8 months later, bankrupt. So if I had sold it to him, I would have gotten a little money, some money, half would have gone to taxes. I was screwed. I mean, it would have been like, I'd have to go back to work. So luck, it was all luck. I don't know why. I've been lucky. It's not that I'm a genius. Stuff happened. I've sold stuff at exactly the right time.
Just your destiny, just your
It is.
path.
I don't know what.
Going
why
with
is
the
that?
flow.
I don't know. And I think it's because I've tried to do the right things, so maybe it's a little reward.
Mm-hmm. It has been so nice speaking with you, and I so appreciate you sharing your experiences.
Yeah, too bad they weren't all about the Army.
No,
That's not what this is about.
no,
It's all
we're about you sharing
you.
your time and your experience, and we so appreciate it. So thank you so much, Bob.
You should be a psychiatrist.
You think so?
She's